Right, so the Oscars are going to be happening soon, and I have a lot to say about the Best Picture nominees. So I'm just going to give my brief thoughts on them. I'm not going to spoil any of these movies, but I will be alluding to things that might happen towards the end, and I will be giving my own interpretations of these movies. So if you don't want to hear that, then watch those movies before watching this. So anyway, let's begin. Okay, we're starting off with American Fiction, directed by Cord Jefferson. This is Jefferson's directorial debut. I think it's a solid debut. I enjoy this movie more for what it has to say, rather than the film itself. It's a satire on how stereotypes get praised as being authentic portrayals of black people, and so by extension, it's a satire on soulless Oscar bait type movies. It's ironic how this got nominated for a load of Academy Awards, because this movie is critical of the people who run award ceremonies. It's quite meta, it's very self-aware. My biggest issue with this movie is that with it being a satire, there are these moments of absurdity, but they're too little, they're too far between, and they're not as exaggerated as I would like them to be. Like, this movie draws comparison to the likes of Greener Grass and Sorry to Bother You. With those movies, they're completely amped up, exaggerated, absurdist, over-the-top comedy films. And I kind of wish that that's what American Fiction was, that the satire was more prevalent. I wish that this movie was more surreal. That's kind of why I enjoy what it has to say more, because both as a comedy and a drama, it tries to balance these two tones. I found both aspects to be underwhelming, and I just didn't like the way it was shot. It looked like a sitcom. I didn't like it how flat and unimaginative the whole thing looked. With that, let's get into the nominations. Alright, so this is nominated for Best Picture. It'd be funny if it won, mostly because that's kind of what the movie's poking fun at, is award ceremonies and people artificially inflating their opinion on things to not appear racist, which is one of the satirical elements of it. But other than that, I don't really think it's one of the best of the year, unfortunately. I do think it is lacking in some ways, and besides the kind of ironic meta element it would add, I would be a bit frustrated to see this win. Best performance by an actor in a leading role, Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey Wright has always done supporting roles. He's always been an actor that would show up in a movie. He's kind of like the modern Harry Dean Stanton, where he's like one of the best supporting actors out there. This seems to be his first breakout lead role. I think there might be some other films and TV shows that he stars in. He was great. I really love the character he plays. I love that the character he plays is a total asshole. He's very funny. It is one of the best of the year. I think it is one of the best performances, and it's one of those nominations where if he wins, it would boost his career. And I think that Jeffrey Wright is an underrated actor, so it would be great to see him get recognized in the way that he deserves. And it is a great performance. Best performance by an actor in a supporting role, Sterling K. Brown. This is a bit of a weird one because Sterling K. Brown's character isn't really in the movie all that much. He doesn't have that much screen time, but it was a good performance. Wouldn't really be something that stuck out to me after watching it. I think there are other performances this year that were probably much more compelling and memorable. Not to downplay Brown's performance again, he does really deliver on it, but the competition is fierce in this category, and I think there are a few others this year that were better, but still good to see him recognized. It was a great performance. He definitely added to the movie a lot, I think, both comedically and dramatically. Best Adapted Screenplay, this could very well win this award. This movie does leave a lot to think about, but it isn't perfect. Some parts of it are lacking, and I think some ideas could have been pushed much further. It is an interesting screenplay, and it is a movie that I've been thinking about a lot, despite not enjoying it from start to finish. It is a very interesting film, and the screenplay is what makes it that, more than anything. And then lastly, Best Original Score. Not sure how I feel about this. The score on its own was good, but the way it was used was extremely cheesy and kind of invasive. and it really added to the sitcom-esque vibe. Like, not only is it shot like a sitcom, the way it's scored, the way the score plays over the scenes does feel like a sitcom as well. It kind of cheapens the movie a bit, I thought. In a vacuum, the score was solid. There were much better scores this year. There were loads more scores that I think were much more compelling and striking and memorable. So yeah, American Fiction, it's a bit of a mixed bag. There are parts of it that I wish were done better, and there are parts of this movie that I would actually call genius. It isn't as consistent as I would like it to be, and I think there's lots of room for improvement, but it is a movie that is worth watching, and it's a movie that I would highly recommend, even though I don't think all of it works. So, saying that, I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 on it. Next up is Anatomy of a Fall, directed by Justine Triet. I think this is a meticulously directed film. There's so much to appreciate about it, from the writing to the performances to the technical qualities. I love the look of it. It has some striking visuals and some interesting camera movements. It's edited in such a way that sometimes diegetic music from one scene will continue to play over another scene, and it then helps contrast or enforce the mood of the next scene. And I think it's a very interesting way of linking these scenes together and creating a distinct and nuanced mood and atmosphere. The performances are all fantastic. Sandra Hüller is the lead. I love her performance. It's a very nuanced performance, I think, but at the same time she's able to, reach into the higher emotions and get really agitated and charged when it calls for it. Milo Mercado Grane, Milo Mercado Grane, I think is how you pronounce his name. I think I got it wrong. He's only about 12 years old, and he plays the kid in it. He plays the son in it, and he delivers one of the absolute best performances I've seen in 2023. It's surprising because in order to be a good actor, you generally need experience, and when you're a kid, you just don't have enough experience. So a lot of child actors tend to be bad, but this kid delivers one of the best performances of 2023. He is incredible. There's so much raw and realistic emotions coming from him, and it's not just that he's able to emote or say the lines correctly, it's that the way the character handles the emotions as well. There are points where you can tell he's trying not to cry, like he's fighting his emotions at points, which I think is especially affecting and very rare to see. And I think he absolutely nailed it, and it is, again, I have nothing but praise for his performance. He was outstanding. This movie is a courtroom drama. It's a courtroom drama / murder mystery, and what I like about this movie is two things. One is that it really plays into the ambiguity of the mystery. Even by the end, I still think that there's a case to be made as to whether this woman is innocent or guilty. There are some scenes that you might have to rewatch, and you might get a different interpretation of what a character is saying. Kind of reminds me of Rashomon in that it really emphasizes the subjectivity of the truth, and how everyone has their own interpretation of what the truth is, and then that leads then back to the audience, that even the audience, us watching the movie, will have our own ideas of what actually happened. Another thing that I love about this movie is that it in parts reminds me a lot of Marriage Story, and Justine Triet, being the writer and director, has come out and said that she was directly inspired by Marriage Story, which is not surprising at all. You can tell that she has an affinity for that movie just by watching this. The way that this relationship is explored is that they use the courtroom setting to explore this relationship, and I think it offers, not only does it offer a compelling character study of the two characters, the husband and wife, but the fact that it's approached in this way, the fact that they explore it through a courtroom setting, then plays into the themes of the movie, of this invasion of privacy. It kind of explores how can someone be defined entirely by a single emotion, by a single thought, by a single action, If someone has an aggressive outburst, how much does that actually say about them as a person? Is it not human for all of us to have these types of emotions? And it's just that we're lucky to have them concealed, to not have them recorded or seen by others. And this invasion of privacy is emphasized throughout the film by the fact that there are these point of view shots of other characters watching the main character. It just reinforces that there are these eyes constantly gazing on her most private and intimate moments with her husband, that I think that neither of them would want to have shared with anyone. And I've seen this movie twice now, and it dawned on me on the second watch that the fact that I wanted to see this movie again plays into the themes of the movie. The fact that I essentially wanted to see this woman's private, intimate affairs be explored, the fact that I was nosy, that is part of the movie, is part of the character, is that she's being violated in some way. But she has to be to prove her innocence. I think it's such an intelligent movie. It's 2.5 hours long as well, and it just flies by. Like, the second time I watched it, it flew by. I didn't even feel the runtime at all. So let's just go through the nominations and see what it's nominated for. So it's nominated for Best Picture of the Year. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. I would be thrilled to see this win. It absolutely deserves it. Best Achievement in Directing, yes, Justine Triet. You can tell that every minute granular detail was planned out. There's such a distinct voice to this film. It really feels that Trier had something that she wanted to share, and she knew how to do it, and she did it in an effective way, both dramatically and emotionally. Best performance by an actress in a leading role, Sandra Hüller. Absolutely, she was incredible. I said how much range she was able to bring and how much raw emotion she was able to conjure. Best Original Screenplay. I've been thinking about this movie constantly. It has not left my mind, and I want to see it a third time. So yeah, absolutely deserves that award. Best Achievement in Film Editing. I've already talked about how the music is played over, is how they kind of link scenes together through the music, but there are also some cuts in this that really left an impact. There's one moment in particular where they cut, and the fact that they cut heightens the impact of the scene in such a visceral way. You can almost feel the wind be taken out of your stomach when that cut happens. It's an incredibly effective moment in that film. It's an incredibly striking moment, I thought. It's nominated for 5 Oscars, and I think it deserves every single one, and I would be happy to see it win any of them. I've nothing much else to say about this movie for now, because I could be here all day. Again, I love this movie, and I'm feeling a 9 out of 10 on this. Okay, so Barbie. This is the third feature-length film by director Greta Gerwig, and to be honest, this is my favorite film from her yet. I wasn't really big on Lady Bird or Little Women, but Barbie seems to work for me somehow, which I was not expecting at all. There is so much zeitgeist and even controversy surrounding this film that I don't even know where to begin. I guess I'll start by saying that I like this movie, and my biggest criticism is that I don't think it's perfect, and I think that some parts of it are half-baked, but at the same time, due to this being a corporate product / advertisement in movie form, the fact that there's any substance at all in this movie is commendable and really elevates it beyond the disaster that it could have been. There's another similar corporate product type movie that I'll get to later that's nominated for an Oscar, and that movie was terrible. It's a solid comedy. I like the visual style of it. I like the sense of humor. The musical numbers are great. The movie doesn't take itself seriously at all. I like that it pokes fun at Mattel. I like that it's constantly poking fun at itself. There are several scenes that even point out how absurd the whole thing is and how little sense it actually makes, and that it shouldn't be thought about on a literal level. The comments it makes on gender, I think, while I appreciate that it tries to tackle these subjects, and in some ways it succeeds, I don't think it goes all the way through with it and is kind of half-baked in some ways, but again, this is going back to what I was saying earlier. The fact that it's there at all elevates this movie above its peers because it at least is trying to say something, and there are some things it does say that I resonate with. I really appreciate how it tackles the male gender. The way the movie's done is that Ken joins the patriarchy without fully understanding what it actually is, and has a weird, almost idealistic view of what it is, and kind of doesn't like it by the end because he actually finds out what it means. And I think that is a very true statement, and I feel like a lot of people don't realize how all these young men can get essentially recruited by the likes of Andrew Tate and Ben Shapiro and all those other dog shit scam artists. So yeah, let's go through the nominees. It has 8 nominations, so I'll have more to say based on its nominations. Right, it's nominated for Best Picture. I don't want it to win because we will never hear the end of it. We will never fucking hear the end of it if this wins Best Picture. Next up is Best Adapted Screenplay. I think it's adapted because there were other Barbie movies, and then that makes this an adaptation. I think that's how the adapted category works. If there are other movies with the same name, like that are from the same property, your screenplay, every other screenplay gets counted as adapted, even though it's not based on a book or a play or whatever. Best Adapted Screenplay, I already talked about the screenplay. I do think that while it tries and in some ways succeeds, I don't think it goes all the way. I also think that it has some pacing issues, but it's also in some ways smart and refreshing and funny. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Not too sure how I'd feel about it winning Best Adapted Screenplay. I think there are probably other nominees that are more deserving of it, but yeah, why not? Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role, Ryan Gosling. He was fantastic. He actually stole the show. He was hilarious. I don't know, maybe I'm contradicting the themes of the movie, but he was probably the best part about it. If he wins, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to see Ryan Gosling win an Oscar finally. America Ferrera is nominated for Best Supporting Actress. This is a weird one. I don't think anyone was expecting this, and I don't think many people were even thinking about America Ferrera's performance when Barbie was released. I don't know how I feel about this. I think it'd be a bit shocking if she won, because I think there were other better performances this year. Not that she did a bad job, it's just I don't really think she was Oscar worthy. This is a bit strange, but whatever. She was good. Best Achievement in Production Design. Honestly, the production design is one of my favorite things about this movie. I love how it looks really fake and plasticky and sugary and colorful and bright. They even made the props in the set smaller in reference to the fact that the Barbie toys are out of proportion to the dollhouses that they come with, which I think is funny, and it really fits. I love the slight awkwardness to it. I like that. Aside from the comedy writing and the Ryan Gosling's performance, I do think the production design was the best aspect about it, and I'd be happy to see it win. Best Achievement in Costume Design, yeah, sure, why not? I don't really have strong feelings about this. I'm pretty sure they did replicate actual costumes that the Barbie and Ken dolls were released with in the toy line. Yeah, the costumes, from what I remember, they were distinct. Some of them were elaborate and memorable even. Again, no strong feelings, but I wouldn't be upset if it won. So lastly, Barbie is nominated for 2 Best Original Songs. It has 2 nominations in this category. First one being What Was I Made For? This is a Billie Eilish and Phineas song. I think it's the favorite to win it. I'm expecting this one to win, but it's not my favorite. I don't even think it fits within the movie. It's a very dreary and somber and even whiny kind of song. I've only seen the movie once, back when it released back in July, and from what I can remember, there isn't any scene that has that same tone or emotions as this song. It feels really out of place. I think I even remember when it started playing over the end credits thinking, like, this sounds really overwrought compared to what the rest of the film is, being this campy, absurdist, silly, cutesy comedy. Not really my thing. I don't really like it. It's alright. It's not a bad song. It's just not my thing, and I'm expecting it to win the Oscar anyway, so Yeah, my money's on that, even though I don't like it. And then the last one is I'm Just Ken, which is a Mark Ronson song. Andrew Watt is credited as well. Between the two Barbie songs that are nominated, this is my favorite. This is a more suited song in terms of tone for the Barbie film. It's a campy, silly, purposefully overdramatic song. It's funny, it's catchy, it has like a big chorus to it. I enjoy it more than the other one, but I'm not expecting it to win, but that's just my thoughts on it. Overall, I like Barbie despite having a lot of criticisms for it. It has a lot going for it. It has more to say than most movies, and a lot of movies have nothing to say at all. I think it has a few deserving nominations, but there are a few here that I don't really think it deserves. Lastly, I kind of just view it as simply as a fun, absurdist fantasy comedy. It's like Elf. It reminds me a lot of Elf. It's a better version of Elf. But with that being said, I'm feeling a 7 out of 10 on Barbie. Next up is The Holdovers, which is the latest film directed by Alexander Payne. I haven't seen every single Alexander Payne movie. I'd seen The Descendants like a decade ago, but I still remember some parts about it. Like, there are some scenes that are still stuck in my mind, so I guess that kind of speaks for the quality of the film, like the fact that I saw it over a decade ago and I can still remember parts about it. There are movies that I've seen a week ago that I could barely remember. He also made Downsizing, which was bad. That was a very bad movie. Downsizing was terrible. That's a movie that you put on to torture someone. That was really bad. I don't know what he was trying to do with that movie. It was horrendous. And then the best movie I've seen from Alexander Payne is Sideways, which is a really great indie comedy drama. Has very fun and watchable characters and interesting dynamics and is effectively dramatic when it needs to be. And that movie starred Paul Giamatti, and he's now reuniting with Alexander Payne again for The Holdovers. And this movie is solid. It's not my favorite of the year. It has a lot going for it, but in some ways it just doesn't really stick with me in the way that other movies do. I love the character that Paul Giamatti plays. He is so watchable. I could watch like 3 other movies with that character. There are some great performances and it has a distinct look to it, like a purposefully dated 70s style, which I think works for the film. It does feel very warm and cozy. It's a very easy to watch film. Let's go through what it's nominated for. It has 5 nominations. So Best Picture, no, I don't think it's as good as other films. As I said, it's not my favorite of the year, and there are so many films that are much better than this. I think it would be kind of annoying to see this win Best Picture because there are so many other films that are nominated this year that are so much more interesting and have so much more to say than this movie that I think it'd be a waste to give it the award to this. Best performance by an actor in a leading role, Paul Giamatti. Absolutely, I think Paul Giamatti is an underrated actor. His performance is fantastic, obviously, but I would love to see him in more movies as well. So not only would it be a deserved win for him, because I do think his performance is great here, I do think it'll help boost his career and get him in other projects. Best performance by an actress in a supporting role, Davine Joy Randolph. She was alright. I think there were better nominees this year. She was good, she wasn't bad. I don't really think she deserves the Oscar though, to be honest. Not a bad performance again, but didn't really stick with me the way others have. Best original screenplay, it has some horrendous pacing issues. Like the last half of this movie felt totally unnecessary. It has great characters who are very watchable, and I love seeing them in scenarios and like all the different situations they end up in, but the movie doesn't really have much to say, I don't think. Or if it does, it isn't really that compelling. And I'd be kind of upset to see this win Best Original Screenplay. And then Best Achievement in Film Editing. There wasn't really much about the editing that stuck out to me. I'm struggling to remember anything about the editing. Is this in reference to the fact that they put a filter or something? Like they put the grain on in post-production? Like they shot it on digital and then added the grain after the fact? Is that what the editing is in reference to? Does that count as editing? It kind of does, because it's a post-production effect that affects the film itself. I don't know. Best editing, no. There were other films that had better editing, and there was nothing really about the editing that stuck out to me, from what I can remember at least. So yeah, The Holdovers, it's a nice, warm, cozy Christmas movie. It's something that you'd watch with your parents. It's a nice movie. It's easy to watch. It has some good performances in it. and that's about it. I'm feeling a 6 out of 10 on it. Alright, next up is Killers of the Flower Moon. This is the latest film from legendary director Martin Scorsese, and I think this is one of his best yet. I think this will go down as one of his absolute best. This man has already cemented himself in film history, and I think that people will look back and they'll view this film on the same level as Goodfellas and Raging Bull. I really think he outdid himself with this one. For a 3.5 hour long film, I was totally engaged the entire time. I think it could have been longer. It feels like a luxury. I feel like Martin Scorsese is treating us with this. This feels like a big fat wedding cake of a movie. It has a load of nominations, and I feel like I can give my thoughts about the movie as a whole through the nominations because it has so many. I could just end up repeating myself. So it's nominated for Best Motion Picture of the Year. It's one of my favorites of the year. I would not be upset seeing this win. I think it would be a deserved win. Best Achievement in Directing, Martin Scorsese. Yep, this feels like a classic. This has classic written all over it. Every scene had something that kept me engaged. This really felt like a movie that Scorsese cared about. It has that kind of classic Scorsese style as well. Like, it does slightly remind me of his older films in some ways. Like, he's able to keep his voice, keep his trademark after all these years. I think he's in his 80s now, and the fact that he's able to show that he's still got it, I think is commendable. If he wins Best Director again, I wouldn't be upset. I guess the one thing is about Martin Scorsese winning Best Director is the fact that he's Martin Scorsese. Does he even need to win it? Because I think the award might benefit one of the smaller directors who got nominated this year. He's not going to get the same career boost out of it as, you know, someone like Justine Triet would. Aside from that, yeah, he does deserve it. Best performance by an actress in a leading role, Lily Gladstone. She's my pick. She was phenomenal. There are some parts of her performance that are absolutely harrowing. She was able to completely sell the role, and she was even able to deliver on some watchable chemistry with her co-star Leonardo DiCaprio, which I think is fantastic because the character Leo was playing was such a almost cartoony type like character, that the fact that Lily Gladstone was able to have a realistic relationship with him was a difficult balance to pull off. She's my pick. She was incredible. She deserves it. Best performance by an actor in a supporting role, Robert De Niro. He was a bit reserved, and I don't think it's one of his best performances. He was definitely good, but he didn't really stand out, I thought, as much as he could have, which is one of my few criticisms of the film. Again, he was decent, but I think maybe there are other nominees this year who were better. Best achievement in cinematography. Yeah, this movie looks utterly fantastic. It looks so crisp and beautiful and colorful and vivid. There are so many sequences in this film that are stuck in my mind. There's one shot where it's like this long take where the camera is just floating through the house, like going from room to room, and I remember thinking, like, how do they coordinate this? There's like the use of the landscapes and the weather. There's like a shot of a fire, like a big bonfire that just looks so mesmerizing. Yeah, this is one of the best looking movies of the year. There's so many visuals in this film that stick in my mind, and I've only seen it once, and after all this time they're still stuck in my mind. Best achievement in film editing. It has that classic Scorsese feel, and a lot of that comes down to the editing. This is edited by Thelma Schoonmaker, who is a longtime collaborator with Martin Scorsese, and she is one of the reasons why Scorsese has such a potent voice, I think, when it comes to the personality of his films. There's a great harmony, I think, between Scorsese's directing and Schoonmaker's editing, and that is still present here. And that's what I love about it so much, is that it isn't a stale, boring, crusty old movie. It's this lively, energetic film filled with personality and emotion that is communicated so well, and a lot of that has to do with the editing. Best achievement in production design. Yeah, sure, no real strong feelings about it. It's kind of your standard production design for a period piece. If it wins, it wins, but maybe there are other films that I think were a bit more unique this year, but again, I wouldn't be upset. Best achievement in costume design, feel more or less the same. I'm kind of whatever on it. It was good, it was solid. It's kind of what you'd expect from a period piece. Again, maybe there might have been other films that had more extravagant or interesting costume design, but again, if this wins, I wouldn't feel too bad about it. Best original score. The score for this was fantastic. It also helps recapture that classic Scorsese vibe that I really love. Big thumping percussion sounds, but then there's also the classic Western sounding guitar, but then there's also some anachronistic elements in it, like I'm pretty sure there's an electric guitar at some points, which I think is an interesting combination of sounds throughout, and it really helps capture the the energy and the emotions of this film. The emotions and the mood and the tone that the score is able to bring out feels like something you'd hear in a classic movie, which is why I feel so confident in saying that this movie will go down as one of Scorsese's best. There's just so many like small elements throughout this film that coalesce together and make it into something special. If this wins score, I'd be happy about it. It's a fantastic score. Finally, best original song. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but it's called Wajaje, a Song for My People by the Osage Tribal Singers. This is a interesting pick. It's not really a song in the same way that, I don't know, I'm Just Ken is a song. It's certainly there to add to the aesthetics and mood and emotions of the film. It's not really a song that has mass appeal for kind of obvious reasons, but it has a lot of energy. It has a lot of passion behind it. You can tell like that the performers, they're really into it. It sounds like dozens of people performing all at once. It is a song that does bring out emotions. If this wins, yeah, sure, why not? Not really a song I think that a lot of people will listen to, but it does drive emotions out of me, which is, I think, what is important. Love this film. It's fantastic. Very few 3.5 hour long films that I can say that I'm rushing to see again. I can see myself watching this again and again over the years. It's a film that I feel like I will grow old with. And I've said this multiple times, but I really feel that it's one of Scorsese's best. I think it's better than anything he released during the 2010s, and that's an opinion that I hope to stand by. I'm feeling a 9 out of 10 on this. Next up is Maestro. This is the second feature-length film from director Bradley Cooper, his first being A Star Is Born all the way back in 2018. I liked A Star Is Born for what it was. It was through and through Oscar bait. It was extremely cookie cutter and cliched and predictable, but it was watchable and it had some admirable qualities. Now, Maestro sees Cooper trying to be more ambitious with his filmmaking, but he's also regressing in other ways as well. The things that I like about Maestro are much better than what I liked about A Star Is Born, but what I didn't like about Maestro is much, much, much worse than anything in A Star Is Born. My biggest issue with this movie is just that it is so incredibly, mind-numbingly boring. It's a movie that doesn't even have a story. This is going to be a very difficult film to talk about because I've only seen it about a month and a half ago as of recording this. I remember absolutely nothing about it. I'm going to try my best and try and remember what I thought of it. I think the most overwhelming emotion that I felt was boredom. I think it was after about maybe the 30-minute mark, I was just waiting for it to end. It was extremely painful to sit through. It was not an enjoyable watch at all. So, Best Picture. No, this is easily my least favorite nominee out of the Best Picture category. I would be fuming to see this win. This is the most uninteresting and dull film nominated this year. There are so many other films that are much more creative and interesting and compelling and well made, and above all else, there are other films that actually have a point and actually have a story that they want to share. In Maestro, it's like getting neuralized, basically. So no, it shouldn't have even been nominated. Best performance by an actor in a leading role, Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper's performance was extremely inconsistent, and I have a theory as to why his performance was inconsistent, why his performance was like that. And it's that the performance is divided into two parts. There's the young Bernstein and the older Bernstein. In the older Bernstein, he comes across as very natural and candid and organic, and it feels very authentic. In the younger Bernstein, it's extremely wooden and awkward and kind of jarring. He has this piercing wooden gaze that is so uncomfortable to look at. And my theory is that there's probably more footage available of older Bernstein for Cooper to study than there is of the younger Bernstein. So I think Cooper probably had to come up with his own ideas of how younger Bernstein would act, whereas he was able to study and replicate the footage of older Bernstein. And I think that's why there's a huge discrepancy in the performance, because one half feels more organic because he's copying a person, whereas the other one he's kind of going by eye. The fact that there's any inconsistency in the performance at all, I think, is enough to say that he shouldn't have been nominated. For this to be up for an Academy Award, up for to be one of the most prestigious awards in film, I shouldn't have such obvious criticisms with the performance, so he shouldn't win. It would be very annoying to see him win, honestly. Best performance by an actress in a leading role, Carey Mulligan. I remember nothing about her. I would have forgotten that she was in this. I don't remember a single word that she says. I don't remember anything her character does. I am struggling to even recall her in the actual movie. It's a shame because Carey Mulligan is a great actor. She's a fantastic actor. It would be a crying shame to see that this is what she wins her Oscar for. This dull, forgettable performance that is nowhere near her career highlights. So it would be a shame to see her win, honestly. Both for Mulligan and for the other actors nominated. Best original screenplay. No, there was no story. There was nothing to watch. It was over 2 hours of nothing. It was totally empty. It's probably the only Best Picture nominee this year that I would call soulless. It's a dead husk of a movie, and there was nothing special or interesting or remarkable about that screenplay at all. It was total Oscar bait. Honestly, I thought the screenplay was worthless. No, it shouldn't win. Best Achievement in Cinematography. This is another one of those nominations where I can justify the win because the person nominated is someone that I like. It's Matthew Libatique. He did a lot of the Darren Aronofsky films. I'm a huge fan of those movies, and all those movies look great. I can justify it in saying, oh, Matthew Libatique, he's a talented cinematographer. I would like to see him win an Oscar, but I want to see him win an Oscar because of his contributions to other better movies, and not because of his contributions to Maestro. In a vacuum, the cinematography in Maestro is decent. It's probably my favorite part about it. One of the few things that I can remember about this movie are some of the shots, some of the camera movements and the lighting changes, especially towards the beginning. But do I want Libatique to win the Oscar because of how great the cinematography in Maestro was? No, it's because he was good in other things, and I think he should have been recognized more in the past. If he wins, it wouldn't be a deserved win, but he's a talented cinematographer, and it would be great to see him in more projects, but it's not something that I want to see win because of the merits of the filmmaking itself, unfortunately. Best Sound. It just seems obligatory. It's a movie about music. Yeah, sure, it would probably win this, even though I think there were other movies that had more interesting uses of sound. It's just what you'd expect, basically. It wasn't really anything that stood out to me. Best Achievement in Makeup and Hairstyling. Alright, this is the big controversy about this movie, in that Bradley Cooper plays Leonard Bernstein, who is a real-life person. It's a biopic. And Leonard Bernstein was Jewish, and Bradley Cooper used prosthetics, and one of the prosthetics that he used was an enlarged nose. Enlarged noses are an offensive Jewish stereotype, so it was considered offensive for Cooper to do that. I've seen people call it Jew face. Bernstein's children have come out and said that they defended the decision. Not only do they defend the decision, but they actually endorse it. First of all, just because Bernstein's children come out and say that they approve of it doesn't mean that it kind of acquits it of being an offensive gesture. Second of all, whoever's decision it was, most likely Bradley Cooper's, because he's the director, writer, producer and star of the film. He was obviously involved in this decision, I think, in some capacity, but whoever's decision it was to have this makeup effect was a complete and utter moron, because they should have known better. They should have absolutely have known better that no matter how good their intentions were, that it would have been seen as offensive. The amount of people these decisions have to go through when making a movie, the fact that it got all the way into production, into the finished product, the fact that it's there at all is an unbelievably massive lapse in judgment. And I think it's kind of unacceptable that that was something that they even allowed to happen. They should have absolutely have known better. I don't even know how it even made it into the film, and the fact that it's nominated for best hair and makeup is a joke. Honestly, it's an utter farce. It shouldn't have been a decision that was allowed to have happened. It was something that they shouldn't have even thought about. It's literally the one thing you don't do. it's like the one thing you shouldn't really do if you're portraying a Jewish person is exaggerate them in a way that can be deemed offensive at all. How many hours Bradley Cooper would have had to sit in the makeup chair as they applied it, and like not one person thought this could be viewed as offensive. Like it's absolutely insane, and it makes me think that they're living in a Hollywood bubble. This movie was a total chore to watch. I remember basically nothing about it. I don't think it deserves any of the Oscars it's nominated for. I don't think it should have been nominated for any to begin with. It's a soulless, monotonous, Oscar bait biopic that we get once every year. It has nothing to say. It's extremely inconsistent. Parts of it can be rightfully deemed as offensive, and as soon as the Oscars are over, no one's going to remember that this exists, and I'm feeling a 4 out of 10 on this. We're on to the big boss of the Oscars this year. That is Oppenheimer, which is leading the way with 13 nominations. Much like Killers of the Flower Moon, I'm just going to go straight into the nominations. So it's nominated for Best Picture. This is what I'm expected to win, not what I want to win. I would bet money that this will win Best Picture, but not my choice personally. Best Achievement in Directing, Christopher Nolan. It's not as good as his other movies, and I think there are some choices here that don't really work, but again, he's probably going to win it. Best Performance by an Actor in a Leading Role, Cillian Murphy. Absolutely, he was the best part about this movie. I remember watching him in this movie and thinking, he's going to win that Oscar. He is phenomenal, he's incredible. Everything from his posture to his body language to the inflections of his voice. You know, there was so much to his performance to appreciate. He really transformed into the role. He really gave it his all. He was easily one of the best performances of the year, like hands down, and I think he is the most deserving. I would be shocked to see if he didn't win. Best Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role, Emily Blunt. I was expecting her to get nominated. I think she was great. I think it might be one of her best career-wise, and I wouldn't be upset if she won. She was great. Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role, Robert Downey Jr. Again, I think he's going to win. He's probably going to win it, but he's not my choice. He wasn't that amazing. He was alright. He was solid. I think there were better performances this year, honestly. I don't get the hype behind Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. Sorry. Best Adapted Screenplay. I just didn't give a fuck about the whole communist accusation thing. They spent way too long on it. They spent more runtime on the communism part than on the actual building of the bomb, which was the interesting part, which, like, how do you get a group of people together and make the most destructive weapon in human history? That was what was interesting to me, and I get it. It was something that was real. It was something that happened. It was a part of Oppenheimer's life. It is a part of the story, but I just didn't care, and those scenes were so repetitive. They just went on for ages, and they could have cut them all out and it wouldn't have changed anything. They were such a drag. I just wanted them to cut back to something else. Like, whenever they cut to Jason Clarke, like whenever they cut back to that interrogation room or the courtroom, I remember thinking, like, no, don't. I don't want to see more of this. Like, I remember feeling like I was being dragged into something that I didn't want. Yeah, I didn't like it. Yeah, sorry. And again, there were other films that I think were better this year. Best Achievement in Cinematography. Yeah, why not? It looked good. I think there were better nominations this year. It was solid. Best Achievement in Film Editing. Absolutely not. The editing in this was horrendous. I hated the editing in this. The editing in this ruined the movie for me. The way it's edited is like a trailer, and immediately it builds up this huge amount of tension and suspense, and it carries that through the whole movie. And the whole movie is edited like that. It's edited in this impressionistic way where not only is it jumping from time and place, like constantly jumping from before the war, during the war, after the war, constantly zipping around the place, but it's doing that within the scenes themselves. Within the scenes, the camera cannot rest. It doesn't ever rest. It's constantly just going from one angle to the next, and it was so frustrating. Just set the camera down, have the actors play it out. and just have the scene patiently and organically develop before my eyes and stop having it being interrupted and bringing me back to fucking Jason Clarke asking him, is he a communist, for the 50th time, and stop playing the music. The music was playing constantly throughout the movie. It was such an exhausting watch. It felt like I was holding a heavy object for 3 hours, and as soon as the end credits began running, I remember feeling relieved. And I think that there is a great movie in here somewhere that if they edited it differently, if it wasn't edited like a nightmare, if it wasn't edited like a trailer, and they edited it like a normal movie, with scenes with shots that weren't, like, why was it edited like a Jason Bourne movie? Like, why? Just have scenes play out and have a shot that lasts longer than 10 seconds, please. That's all I wanted, and I didn't get that, and it was an exhausting watch. The editing ruined the movie for me. I'm sorry. I'm adamant about this. Best achievement in production design, yeah, sure, no strong feelings. Production design was solid. Best achievement in costume design, there were better costume designs. To be honest, I think there were more expressive ones. This one, it's kind of like Killers of the Flower Moon in that it's kind of what you'd expect, but I even think in Killers of the Flower Moon there was a bit more variety in the costume designs. Best achievement in makeup and hairstyling, yes, there's old age makeup towards the end of Cillian Murphy playing old Oppenheimer, and that looked so realistic. It was frightening. I guess even Albert Einstein, that character, counts towards it as well. Yeah, the makeup and hairstyling was great. Best sound, yes, this is the loudest movie I think I've ever seen. I think it deserves best sound purely because the speakers didn't explode when it played. Like, whatever software they used to engineer the sound design of this film, I think it must be state of the art. Like, it must be new. It must be something that NASA uses. I could feel the sound in my stomach when I was watching this. It deserves best sound purely because of how mind-blowingly loud this thing is. Finally, best original score. As I said earlier, right, it's that the score itself is great. The score itself is fantastic. I think it's a deserving nomination. But the way it's used in the film is detrimental to both the film itself and the score. Huge fan of the score, not a huge fan of how it was used. Those are my thoughts on Oppenheimer. I was able to say everything that I wanted to say about it. It's a very ambitious film. It's well acted. There are a lot of things about it that I don't care about, and there are a lot of things about it that just do not work for me at all. When I first watched this, I gave it a 7, but when I started actually thinking about watching it again, I was filled with so much reluctance, like, at the actual thought of watching it again. Not really a film that I enjoyed, unfortunately, even though I was looking forward to it for most of last year. It'll win the Oscars, don't worry about what I have to say about it. It'll win all the Oscars. It's going to devour the Oscars. So yeah, 6 out of 10. That's just how I feel about it. Next up is Past Lives. This is the debut feature film from director Sailing Song, and it's one of my favorites of the year. I really like this movie. It only has 2 nominations, which I think is unfortunate. It's nominated for Best Picture. I don't think it'll win, unfortunately, even though I think in some ways it does deserve it because it is a really fantastic film. Best Original Screenplay. Yeah, I would be happy to see this win Best Original Screenplay. What makes this film so special is the fact that it's so stripped back. It's so simple that they just took away any superfluous elements. There's nothing elaborate about it. It's just a very straightforward and simple story that's effectively emotional and resonant and relatable, and that's all it needed to be. And the screenplay is the best part about it. It's a very quiet film in that it doesn't have as much dialogue as you'd expect, which is surprising because it brings obvious comparison to the likes of the Before trilogy, which is extremely dialogue heavy. Whereas in this film, there are some scenes that play out with very minimal dialogue exchanges. There are parts of this film that, as I think about it, they kind of gain more significance as well. Like the opening scene gains a load of significance, I think, by the time you finish the film. Like, you're able to look back on it and get some metaphorical interpretations out of it. It's just unfortunate that it's not the type of film that benefits from the format that the Academy Awards operates on, in that everything's divided into categories, because you look at this film from a distance and you kind of go, yeah, the cinematography is solid but not amazing, the sound design is solid but not amazing, etc. You can kind of go through everything like that. But what makes this film work is just the screenplay and the performances. So you can look at this movie and see that it only has 2 Oscar nominations, with only having realistic prospects about winning one of them. But It just doesn't reflect the actual quality of the film, I think, because it's a film that wasn't trying to win Best Cinematography, it wasn't trying to win Best Editing or etc. It obviously went for a more streamlined approach, and it worked really well for the film. This is a fantastic feature-length debut. It's one of my favorites of the year. I think maybe it could have gotten nominated for Best Director or Best Lead Actress. There are some more awards it could have gotten nominated for. It's just great every once in a while to see a film that doesn't have to be so elaborate to get an emotional response out of me, and because it doesn't need all these tricks. It's just a pure, straightforward, honest film, and I'm feeling an 8 out of 10 on it, and I'm absolutely looking forward to whatever Celine Song does next. Past Lives was a very simple and effective and straightforward and emotional and resonant film. And now we're going to go into the complete inverse, in that we're going to Poor Things, which is a big, loud, abrasive, maximalist, bombastic film that I'm very mild on. This is the latest film from director Yorgos Lanthimos, and I love Yorgos Lanthimos as a filmmaker. Killing of a Sacred Deer, Dogtooth, The Lobster are 3 of my all-time favorite movies, but I think that in the last few years, Lanthimos has been moving away from what I think made him special in the first place. This movie is one of the most aggressively stylized films I think I've seen. It throws the whole book at you. It just tries everything from the editing to the sound to the visuals. Like, everything in this movie is so exaggerated and obnoxious in some ways and in your face. It's like a firework going off at point blank range. My biggest issue with this movie is that for how loud this movie is, for how elaborate it is, for like how fucking much it is, for how much that they're trying with this, it just gets such a meager reaction out of me. I don't find it that funny. I don't find it that thought-provoking. I just didn't really find it that thrilling or disturbing or whatever other emotions it was intending. It just comes across as so mild to me. It just gets such pitiful reactions out of me. And I've seen it twice now. I should preface that I've seen this movie twice now. Both times I just was so lukewarm on it, and it was the second watch that kind of made me realize that I didn't really like it, because there wasn't anything that I was able to discover on rewatch. In fact, it just made me think, wow, this movie is kind of empty. Like, there's kind of really nothing under the hood, in my opinion. In contrast, when you look back on Yorgos Lanthimos' previous films, the 3 that I mentioned, Dogtooth, Killing of a Sacred Deer, and The Lobster, those movies are almost minimalist in how they're presented, and those movies will have some of the most disturbing or thought-provoking or even some of the most hilarious scenes that I've ever seen in a movie, oftentimes in scenes where basically nothing happens at all. Those movies didn't have to do much to get a reaction out of me. Poor Things, as I said, it just tries so hard, and by the end of it I'm just not that impressed or enamored by it, unfortunately, even though there are parts about it that I like, and in theory this is a movie that I should love, but I just find it kind of exhausting after a point. It has 11 nominations, so I'm just going to go right into it. Best Picture. I can see this winning Best Picture. A lot of people love this movie. I'm half expecting this to win, but it's not my choice for Best Picture. Best Achievement in Directing. Yorgos Lanthimos did direct the shit out of this movie. He did so much with it, and it has such a strong visionary style that of course he'd get a nomination for it, but again, I'm just kind of fixating on the emotional reactions it gets out of me. The results just aren't enough, I think, to warrant how bombastic this thing is. Best Performance by an Actress in a Leading Role, Emma Stone. She could win. It's a very brave performance. I think it's a performance that potentially could be a career ender. It's a very unique character that she's playing. I did find her to get kind of annoying after a while, especially on the second watch. Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role, Mark Ruffalo. This is his best performance since Foxcatcher. He's very funny, he's very cartoonish, he's like almost a parody level type character. He might be my choice for Best Supporting Actor. He kind of deserves it, honestly. He's almost unrecognizable. Best Adapted Screenplay. No, there are parts of it that I just don't like and I kind of find gross, and I'm struggling to find what the point is. It's a screenplay that I think the subject matter was kind of mishandled and doesn't really communicate key pieces of information. I just can't get over how it's framed as a good thing for the character who should be a victim. I haven't read the book, so take this with a grain of salt, but not even a grain of salt, like a fistful of salt. But from what I understand, that the adaptation alters some parts of the book to the point where it actually defeats some of the points that the book was trying to make. And from what I understand now, someone can correct me, and I'm kind of just talking about a book that I've only read summaries of now. Alistair Gray set the book in Scotland, in Glasgow, because he felt that England took too much attention away from Scottish culture, and that he wanted to emphasize Scottish culture by showcasing a story that, heavily featured, the arts and the literature from Scotland. And now the movie comes along and sets it in England, which inadvertently becomes the very thing that the book was setting out to fight against. And then I'm pretty sure that the movie also removes the scene that gives the text its namesake, which seems like a blunder, because reading the plot summary of the book, it feels like a much more cohesive story, I think, like the places it goes. And my issue is that I understand that you have to change some things when you're adapting a book into a movie, but the thing is that these changes don't seem necessary, and I feel like they could have easily included them in the movie, and what we got instead feels very diluted and not as interesting, and kind of sidelines a lot of the ideas, or even just flat out contradicts some of the ideas that the book was seemingly going for. So again, I haven't read the book. I have to kind of emphasize this more. I haven't read the book. Maybe someone will correct me. Maybe someone can elaborate better on what I said. It honestly makes me want to read the book. As contrast, just as an example, when I first saw Poor Things, it was the same week I saw Anatomy of a Fall. And when I rewatched both films, it was in the same week. So the same week I rewatched Anatomy of a Fall, the next day I watched Poor Things. And when I was watching Anatomy of a Fall for the second time, I was anticipating each scene. I was thinking, oh, this scene is coming up. Oh, great, I get to see this exchange or this interaction. I knew what was going to happen. But when I was rewatching Poor Things, I was sitting there thinking, how does the character get out of this situation? I don't remember how this movie ends. Like, I forgot massive chunks of this movie in only a few months. It just didn't stick with me. As soon as Christopher Abbott's character shows up, Christopher Abbott's a great actor, by the way. As soon as his character shows up, I was just completely checked out. Both times I watched it, it just drags on, and everything this movie has to say, it wears on its sleeves, and I don't really feel like I have to pick this thing apart, because what it's saying is so obvious and not really communicated or explored in an interesting way. So best adapted screenplay, no, I don't think it deserves it, unfortunately, even though a lot of people will disagree. Next up, best achievement in cinematography. The cinematography is aggressive and bombastic and in your face, everything that I've said before. It definitely has the most cinematography I think I've seen in a movie in 2023. Best achievement in film editing. Sure, why not? I don't know, it doesn't, again, there isn't really anything that sticks out in my mind, and I don't know, Anatomy of a Fall does have some fantastic editing that I remember, as opposed to this. Best achievement in production design, if not Barbie, then this. That's the one thing I do remember about this movie are the sets. There's the oyster bar really stuck out in my mind. There's the brothel, the mansion that Willem Dafoe lives in. Like, there's so many sets in this that really stick out in my mind. Best achievement in costume design. Yeah, really elaborate, colorful, extravagant costumes. I would think it would deserve it. Best achievement in makeup and hairstyling. The prosthetics on Willem Dafoe look great, and Mark Ruffalo had an interesting haircut, I thought. And I liked Emma Stone's hair. Yeah, I think makeup and hairstyling is deserved. And then best score. The score was great from what I can remember. It had a unique tone to it. Oh yeah, just one thing I forgot to mention. I think that I should have mentioned this maybe during the editing. There is one thing I forgot now. There is one thing about the editing that I do like. Is that they're in a carriage and they pull back the window. And this is during the black and white scenes. They pull back the window to look out the moving carriage. And they see the street as they pass by, and I'm pretty sure that when they look out the window, they're projecting like actual old 1800s footage that was like taken, like, I don't know, like 100 years ago. Like, that's actual 100-year-old footage that they're playing from like a London street that the characters are looking out on, and it's like for a split second, and you don't really notice it because the film itself is in black and white during this scene, and the footage itself would be black and white, and I don't know, I think that was an interesting choice. Both times I've seen this movie, I've been left feeling underwhelmed, which is ironic given how big this movie is trying to be. And it's just a movie that I rarely think about. It's a movie that I can't really recommend to anyone, because everyone I've described this movie to is repulsed by it. And so it's a movie that's very difficult to recommend. There are definitely individual parts about it that are great, and I think that on paper this is a movie that I should love, but the finished product is so underwhelming to me, and it just doesn't get much of a reaction in any way. I really hope Yorgos Lanthimos starts working with Efthemis Philippou again. Again, I think I pronounced his name wrong, but Efthemis Philippou, the writer he collaborated for the longest time and made all of his greatest movies with. He's now abandoned him in favor of Tony McNamara, who is not as great, is not as sharp. I don't love this movie, and I'm not really in a rush to see it again, and I'm feeling a 6 out of 10. Thank you. Goodbye. Finally, the last movie that I'm going to talk about is The Zone of Interest. This is the fourth feature-length film from director Jonathan Glazer. I've always been a fan of Glazer. Every movie that he's made I've loved. His first film was Sexy Beast, which is one of the best crime comedies ever, which has an outstanding performance by Ben Kingsley. His next film then was Birth with Nicole Kidman, which was this dark and ominous and surreal and disturbing drama. And then he did Under the Skin, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's a sci-fi horror film that's made with an experimental approach, and it's one of the few films that I would say actually scared me. Now, it's been almost 10 years since Under the Skin was released, and now along comes The Zone of Interest, and this is one of my most anticipated movies of the year. And after seeing it twice now, I can definitively say that it's Jonathan Glazer's best film yet, and it's also my favorite movie of 2023. Much like Under the Skin, this movie, The Zone of Interest, has an experimental approach. It's very slow, it's uneventful, it doesn't really spoon feed information to you. There's like a lot of things that happen in this that you're forced to deduce yourself. Even the way it was filmed is that they set up a load of cameras around the set and let the actors act naturally, not knowing which angle they were going to be presented from. This movie is also experimental in the way that some scenes have like a heat vision filter put over them. It's a very unsettling way of presenting the film. There's actually a part in the film where it feels like the projector has broken. Halfway through the film, it actually looks like the film breaks, and it's such a jarring moment because it kind of snaps you out of the film. And one of the reasons why that's so effective is that with how repetitive and mundane this movie is, it's almost hypnotic. This movie almost lulls you into a rhythm. This kind of dull, repetitive, monotonous, and experimental approach, at a glance it seems kind of calming in some ways, but it's immediately contrasted by the fact that this movie is about Auschwitz, which adds such a horrifying layer to the film that is indescribable. The movie's just basically watching the daily routine of the people who worked at Auschwitz and asking yourself, how could they live like this? How could they live knowing that this is what's happening? And by the end of this movie, it was able to trigger a reaction out of me that was horrifying. It triggered an emotion in me that I'd never felt before. It sounds overly dramatic, but I want to say that this movie gave me an existential crisis. That's the best way I could describe it. I think that everything about this film is fantastic. Fantastically presented, intelligently presented, respectfully presented, given the subject matter as well. The performances are great. There's Christian Friedel. He leaves a lot up for interpretation with his character. Sandra Hüller is in this also, and she's fantastic. She really showcases a range between this and Anatomy of a Fall. She's really cementing herself as one of my favorite actors working today. It's a completely different performance than in Anatomy of a Fall. Her character is much more brutish and kind of cumbersome. Like there's like a slight awkwardness to the way she walks. She has this like specific gait, and I think that just really adds to her character. I think her performance might be the standout. It's the most expressive and memorable of the performances in this film. I've never seen Sandra Hüller in a movie before the last few months. So seeing her in Anatomy of a Fall and The Zone of Interest, it's made me want to go back and watch her older movies. Like, she's such a good actor that she's effectively advertising her filmography to me. So yeah, I want to watch Tony Erdmann now. The cinematography is masterful. Okay, I'm going to pronounce this guy's name wrong. Lukas Schall. He's the same cinematographer as I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And the cinematography in this is stunning. Like, I just love the kind of rigid, obstructed view of the world that this film gives. The lighting in this movie is phenomenal. I just love how this film keeps showing you the same kind of sets, the same rooms, like the same garden over and over again. And I love that over the course of the film you see it under different lighting conditions. It completely transforms the way these settings look, and it really makes the film feel alive. The editing, I've already mentioned how effective and striking the editing was, especially that editing choice towards the middle where it felt like the film breaks. I can't even put into words how great the score is in this movie. It's composed by Mika Levy, who also collaborated with Jonathan Glazer on Under the Skin, and I would say that Under the Skin is probably one of my favorite film scores of all time. I was excited to see that Mika Levy was coming back to work on the next Jonathan Glazer project, and the score in this is the most terrifying thing I think I've ever heard in my life. It slightly reminds me of soundtracks for the blind, which I think is a high compliment I think I can give an artist. But yeah, it's so eerie, it's so haunting, it feels so incomprehensibly huge, and it feels not of this earth. There are just certain parts of it that I can't get out of my head, just how bone-chillingly scary it sounds. As great as the score is, it's actually used very sparingly throughout the film, and I think as great as it is, I think it's actually a very intelligent choice, because it gives room for the sound design, which I would argue is the backbone of this movie. The use of sound in this film is so crucial to the experience that it essentially offers insights to events that happen off screen and helps build a picture of a world that exists beyond the frames of the film. I think, I forget exactly who said it. I think it might have been Jonathan Glazer said, there's two stories to the film, the one that you see and the one that you hear. Not only is the use of sound design so terrifying and effective, but it just says so much. I think it just helps communicate so much about what this film is trying to say, about how this film relates to the modern world. This film feels important. This movie will continue to be relevant for as long as there's human suffering. It's a film that utilizes the medium of film to its fullest extent. There's so much more I could say about this film. I don't know if this sounds kind of dramatic, but what this movie has to say is so profound. It's so huge what this movie is saying that I don't even think it can fit inside this video. So I'm just going to move on to the Oscar nominations and see what it's nominated for. It's nominated for Best Picture. It's my favorite movie of the year. I obviously think it deserves it. Best Achievement in Directing, Jonathan Glazer. Every creative decision in this movie, I think, was intelligent and effective. As I said before, it's a movie that utilizes the medium of film to its fullest extent. It's truly a one-of-a-kind visionary film, and he unquestionably deserves it, in my opinion. Best Adapted Screenplay. It's a movie that I've been thinking about for days. This movie has not left my mind since I've seen it. I would love to see it win this. Best Sound. The sound is crucial to the film. The movie would not be the same without the use of sound. It basically is the movie. It just seems like all the other nominees are just loud, but this one, it's a much more subtle and unique and effective way of approaching the use of sound in a film. So I think just for that, as an achievement, I think it deserves it for that. Finally, Best International Feature Film for the United Kingdom. It's a bit weird seeing this being nominated for international film because it's a UK film. And I was honestly expecting Anatomy of a Fall to be nominated and not this, but I guess the entire film is in German and Polish and I think Yiddish. There's a bit of Yiddish at one point. I guess it qualifies for that. I think that it's obviously going to win because ever since 2019, ever since the year that Green Book won Best Picture, it's been very obvious which film was going to win the International Film Award, because it's when they started consistently nominating international films for Best Picture, And by nominating something for Best Picture and for Best International Film, you're kind of by default saying that this is the best one. My one thing is that based on the pattern that we've seen, it's likely going to win. But a part of me thinks that it might be too avant-garde, it might be too experimental and off-putting for these voters, and that it mightn't be as receptive towards it as some of the other movies that are nominated. That's my one fear. This movie might be too alienating for some people. Other than that, I think it does deserve the International Film Award, because again, it's my favorite movie of the year. Of course, I'm going to say that. There's so much more to say about this movie. I think it deserves much more than 5 Oscar nominations. I have basically no complaints about this movie. There's only one slight nitpick in that there's white subtitles that appear against a white background at one point. That's my one and only complaint. It's something that only appears on screen for a split second. But yeah, an incredibly effective and horrifying and disturbing film. It's unlike anything else I've ever seen, and it's a film that I've been constantly thinking about ever since I've seen it. And with that being said, I am feeling a 10 out of 10 on this. So those are my thoughts on the Best Picture nominees. I was going to talk about all the other nominees, but I ran out of time. If you're interested in what I have to say about them, you can check out my Letterboxd account. I will probably be doing more stuff like this in the future. I'm not too sure. I haven't figured it out yet. So we'll just see where it goes from there. Thank you.